The spring air felt good against Zoe Taylor's face as she walked through Riverdale Park. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Zoe had just finished her study group at the library across from the park. Her backpack felt heavy with textbooks, but her heart felt light. She had aced her practice SAT test earlier that day. Zoe took a shortcut through the park to catch the 6:15 bus. She had promised her parents she'd be home for dinner by 7. They were leaving tomorrow for their 20th anniversary trip to Italy, and tonight was their family dinner before the 2-week vacation. As Zoe walked along the path that cut through the middle of the park, she noticed more people than usual hanging around the old gazebo. Most were teenagers and young adults. Some she recognized from school, others she didn't. She didn't think much of it. The weather was nice, and people were probably just enjoying the evening. Zoe checked her watch. 6:05. She picked up her pace, not wanting to miss her bus. Just as she neared the park exit, she heard shouting behind her. When she turned to look, her stomach dropped. Police cars had pulled up on both sides of the park, their lights flashing but sirens off. Officers jumped out, shouting orders at the groups near the gazebo. "What's happening?" Zoe whispered to herself, frozen in place. People started running in all directions. Before Zoe could make sense of the chaos, an officer spotted her. "Don't move. Stay right there," he yelled, his hand hovering over his holster. Zoe's heart hammered in her chest. "I'm just passing through," she called out, her voice shaking. "I'm on my way to the bus stop." The officer approached her quickly, his face stern. "Put your hands where I can see them." Zoe raised her hands, her textbooks and folders slipping from her grasp and scattering across the ground. Papers with her college essay drafts blew across the grass. "Officer, please, I'm just walking home from the library. I don't know what's going on." "We've got reports of drug dealing in this park," the officer said, looking her up and down. "Everyone here is being detained until we sort this out. But I'm not involved in anything. I was at a study group. Look." Zoe tried to point to her backpack with her school logo, but the officer grabbed her arm. "Hands behind your back," he ordered, spinning her around. "Please, check my student ID. I'm Zoe Taylor. I go to Westridge High. I'm in the honors program." The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Tears welled in her eyes as the officer walked her toward one of the police cars. She could see other teens being handcuffed too, some arguing, others silent with shock like her. "I need to call my parents," Zoe said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're expecting me home." "You'll get your phone call at the station," the officer replied, not looking at her. At the police station, Zoe sat on a hard bench in a room with about 15 other teens and young adults from the park. Some she recognized from school, like Darnell from her chemistry class, who looked as confused as she felt. Others were strangers, looking angry or scared. An officer came in with a clipboard calling names one by one. When he called Zoe Taylor, she stood up quickly. "Date of birth?" the officer asked without looking up. "July 8, 2007, Zoe answered. "Address? 1423 Maple Avenue." The questions continued. Zoe answered each one clearly, hoping her cooperation would help clear things up quickly. When the officer asked if she had anything in her pockets, Zoe explained that her phone and wallet were in her backpack, which another officer had taken. "Am I being charged with something?" Zoe finally asked. "Because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just walking through the park." The officer looked at her for the first time. "Everyone picked up in the sweep is being processed. The detective will sort out who was involved and who wasn't. Can I call my parents now?" Processing first, then calls. Hours passed. Zoe watched as some people were taken to interview rooms and others were moved to holding cells. Her name wasn't called again. She asked another officer about making her call, but he told her to wait. By midnight, Zoe was one of only 5 people still sitting on the bench. "Taylor," a woman officer finally called. "Come with me." Zoe followed her to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. A tired-looking man in a wrinkled suit sat there, flipping through papers. "I'm Detective Powell," he said. "Sit down." Zoe sat across from him, her hands shaking. "Sir, there's been a mistake. I was just walking through the park to catch my bus. I wasn't involved in whatever was happening." The detective looked up at her. "We found drugs at the scene and witnesses say there was a dealing operation going on. Everyone in that park is a suspect until proven otherwise. But I can prove it. Check my backpack, it's full of school books and notes. Call my study group leader, Mrs. Chen, at the library. She can tell you I was there until just before 6. Detective Powell wrote something down. We'll look into it. In the meantime, you're being held on suspicion of drug possession with intent to distribute. The room spun around Zoe. That's impossible. I don't do drugs. I don't sell drugs. I'm 17 years old. I have a 4.0 GPA. I'm applying to colleges right now. Save it for the judge, Powell said, standing up. You'll appear before Judge Harmon tomorrow morning. You get your phone call now and then you'll be moved to juvenile holding for the night. Zoe felt like she couldn't breathe. My parents are leaving for Italy tomorrow morning. Their flight is at 6 a.m. They might have already turned off their phones. Powell shrugged. You get one call. Choose wisely. At the phone, Zoe's hands trembled so badly she could barely dial. As she expected, her mom's phone went straight to voicemail. She tried her dad's, same thing. They always turned off their phones the night before early flights to get good sleep. Tears streamed down Zoe's face as the officer stood waiting. She had one more person she could call, but she hesitated. Her older half-brother, Andre, was busy with his important job in Washington, D.C. They weren't super close. He was 20 years older than her, from their dad's first marriage. But Andre was a lawyer, an important one. If anyone could help her now, it would be him. Zoe dialed his number, praying he would answer despite the late hour. On the fourth ring, a groggy voice answered. Hello? Andre? Zoe's voice broke. It's Zoe, I'm in trouble. I've been arrested, but I didn't do anything wrong. Whoa, slow down. Andre's voice sharpened, sleep fading quickly. Where are you? Riverdale Police Station. They think I was selling drugs in the park, but I was just walking through after study group. Zoe couldn't hold back her sobs. Mom and Dad are about to leave for Italy. I don't know what to do. Listen to me carefully, Andre said, his voice calm but serious. Don't say anything else to the police. If they question you, say you want a lawyer. I'll make some calls right now. What time is your court appearance? Tomorrow morning. Some judge named Harmon. There was a brief silence on the line. Judge Raymond Harmon? I don't know his first name. The detective just said Harmon. Okay, don't worry. I'll handle this. Try to stay calm. The officer signaled that her time was up. I have to go, Zoe said quickly. Please help me, Andre. I promise I will. Remember what I said. Don't answer any more questions. As the officer led her to juvenile holding, Zoe felt slightly calmer knowing Andre was working on helping her. But when she saw the holding cell, a small room with benches along the walls where 3 other teenage girls sat looking miserable, her fear returned. New girl, the officer announced, unlocking the cell door. In you go. Zoe stepped inside and the door locked behind her. The other girls looked her up and down but said nothing. Zoe found a spot on an empty bench and sat down, wrapping her arms around herself. She thought about her parents, probably sleeping peacefully before their dream anniversary trip. She thought about her college applications due in just a few weeks. And she thought about tomorrow morning, when she would face a judge who might not believe she was innocent. Zoe closed her eyes and tried to remember everything she knew about how courts worked, mostly from TV shows and the pre-law club at school. She had rights. She was innocent until proven guilty. But sitting in that cell, those ideas suddenly seemed very far away and very fragile. She just hoped Andre would come through for her. She didn't know exactly what her brother did in Washington, something important with the Justice Department. Their dad always bragged about it at family gatherings. All Zoe knew was that Andre helped put bad people in jail. She never imagined she'd be the one behind bars, counting on him to get her out. As the night dragged on, Zoe couldn't sleep. Tomorrow she would face Judge Harmon, and everything in her life hung in the balance. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and a loud buzzer. Zoe jolted awake on the hard bench, her neck stiff and her eyes burning from lack of sleep. For a split second she didn't remember where she was. Then reality crashed back. Taylor, get up. Court in 30 minutes. An officer called, unlocking the cell door. Zoe stood, trying to smooth her wrinkled clothes and tame her hair with her fingers. She hadn't even brushed her teeth. One of the other girls, who'd been nice enough to share her small blanket during the night, gave Zoe a sympathetic look. First time in the system? The girl asked. Zoe nodded. Judge Harmon, right? He's tough. Don't argue with him. Just say yes, Your Honor, a lot. But I didn't do anything, Zoe whispered. The girl shrugged. Doesn't always matter in there. Those words echoed in Zoe's mind as she was led to a small bathroom where she could at least splash water on her face. She was then handcuffed and taken to a holding room near the courtroom, with about a dozen other people waiting for their hearings. A harried-looking woman in a navy blue suit approached her. "Zoe Taylor? I'm Ms. Winters, your public defender." "Hi," Zoe said, relief washing over her. "My brother is a lawyer. He said he'd help." "I don't see anyone else listed as your representation," Ms. Winters cut in, flipping through a stack of folders. "And we don't have time to wait. You're up in 15 minutes, but let's go over your case quickly," Ms. Winters said, sitting beside Zoe. "You were arrested in Riverdale Park during a drug sweep. The report says you were in the vicinity of known dealers. I was just walking through the park. I had nothing to do with any of that. I was coming from study group at the library." Ms. Winters nodded, but Zoe could tell she was only half listening. "First offense, that's good. You're a minor, also good. But Judge Harmon takes drug cases very seriously, especially in school zones, which the park technically is. But I don't have any drugs. Did they even test me? Check my backpack? Your backpack is in evidence. I'll request it be brought to court." Ms. Winters made a note. "The strategy is to request release to your parents' custody and ask for a later hearing date when we can present evidence of your study group alibi. My parents left for Italy this morning. They'll be gone for 2 weeks," Ms. Winters frowned. "Any other relatives who can take custody?" "My brother in D.C., but too far. Judge Harmon won't release you to someone out of state." Ms. Winters stood up. "We'll request house arrest with ankle monitoring then. Not ideal, but better than juvenile detention." Before Zoe could respond, an officer called her name. It was time. The courtroom was smaller than Zoe had imagined, with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of old coffee. Judge Harmon sat at a high bench. A man in his 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look up as Zoe entered. "Case number 347B, State v. Taylor, juvenile respondent," the court clerk announced. Ms. Winters guided Zoe to stand before the judge. Zoe's legs felt like jelly. "Your Honor, Lisa Winters for the respondent," Ms. Winters said. Judge Harmon glanced up briefly. "Charges?" A man in a suit at another table stood. "Tom Garcia for the state. The juvenile is charged with presence in a known drug trafficking area with intent to purchase, a Class B misdemeanor." Zoe's head snapped toward him. That wasn't what the detective had said last night. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ms. Winters squeezed her arm in warning. "How does the respondent plead?" Judge Harmon asked, still looking at papers. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Ms. Winters replied. "My client was merely passing through the park after a study session at Riverdale Public Library. We request immediate release on her own recognizance pending trial." Judge Harmon finally looked at Zoe, his eyes cold and assessing. "Ms. Taylor, do you understand the charges against you?" "Yes, Your Honor, but I didn't—" "A simple yes or no will suffice," he interrupted. Zoe swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor. You were in Riverdale Park at approximately 6:15 p.m. yesterday, correct?" "Yes, but I was just walking to the bus." "Yes or no, Ms. Taylor?" Zoe clenched her fists at her sides. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Harmon nodded. "Mr. Garcia, what does the state recommend for pretrial release?" The prosecutor stood again. "Given the current drug crisis in our city and the respondent's presence in a known dealing location, we recommend a bail of $5,000 and surrender of passport." Zoe gasped. $5,000, passport? Ms. Winters jumped in. "Your Honor, that's excessive for a first-time juvenile offender with no criminal record. My client is an honor student at Westridge High with a 4.0 GPA. So was the Thompson boy before he overdosed in that same park last year," Judge Harmon replied sharply. "Education is no guarantee of good judgment." Zoe felt her face burn with anger and humiliation. She hadn't done anything wrong, yet this judge was treating her like a criminal. "Your Honor," Ms. Winters tried again. "The respondent's parents are currently traveling internationally. We request house arrest with monitoring if Your Honor feels bail is necessary." Judge Harmon raised an eyebrow. "No responsible adults available?" "Even worse." He tapped his pen against his desk. "Bail is set at $3,000. Next hearing in, let's see, 2 weeks on the 30th. 2 weeks?" Zoe blurted out. "But I have school, and my parents won't be back yet to post bail." Judge Harmon's eyes hardened. "Young lady, this is not a negotiation. If bail cannot be posted, you will remain in juvenile detention until your hearing." "Your Honor," Ms. Winters interjected, "perhaps we could contact the respondent's brother in Washington, D.C. to post bail remotely." "Is this brother a legal guardian?" "No, Your Honor, but Then he has no standing in my courtroom. Judge Harmon banged his gavel. Next case. As Zoe was led away, she felt numb with shock. 2 weeks in juvenile detention for walking through a park. This couldn't be happening. Back in the holding area, Miss Winters looked apologetic. I'm sorry, Zoe. Judge Harmon has a reputation for being strict. This isn't strict, it's wrong. Zoe said, her voice rising. You have to call my brother. His name is Andre Taylor. He works for the Justice Department in D.C. I'll try, Ms. Winters promised, though she looked doubtful. But unless he can post bail or find someone local who can take custody, there's not much he can do from Washington. Zoe was returned to the juvenile holding facility, a larger building with actual cells instead of the overnight holding area. She was processed again. Fingerprints, photo, personal items cataloged. They gave her a gray jumpsuit to wear and assigned her to a small cell with bunk beds. Her cellmate, a girl named Tasha who looked about 16, barely acknowledged her. That night, Zoe lay on the top bunk staring at the ceiling, too overwhelmed to cry. She thought about her parents probably just landing in Rome, excited for their anniversary trip. They wouldn't check their phones until they got to their hotel. What would they think when they saw all the missed calls? Would they have to cut their trip short? And what about school? College applications? Everything she'd worked for seemed to be slipping away because of one walk through a park. The next day dragged by with boring meals, structured recreation time in a small courtyard, and long hours sitting in a common room with other teens who seemed far more accustomed to this place than she was. It wasn't until the third day that an officer came for her. Taylor, you've got a visitor. Hope surged through Zoe. Had Andre come? Or had her parents somehow found out and returned? She was led to a visiting area with small tables separated by low dividers. Sitting at one of them was Ms. Winters, looking more put together than she had in court but still harried. Any news? Zoe asked as soon as she sat down. I've been trying to reach your brother, Ms. Winters said. Left messages but haven't heard back. Zoe's hope deflated. What about my backpack? Did you check it? It proves I was coming from the library. I've submitted a request to examine the evidence, but these things take time. Judge Harmon's clerk is not very helpful. So I'm just stuck here for 2 weeks? For nothing? Ms. Winters sighed. I'm doing what I can, Zoe. The system moves slowly. After Ms. Winters left, Zoe was told she had phone privileges. With shaking hands, she tried her parents again. Still no answer. She hesitated, then dialed Andre's number again. This time, he picked up immediately. Zoe, are you okay? The sound of his voice made her tears finally break free. No, I'm not okay. I'm in juvenile detention. The judge set bail at $3,000 and my next hearing isn't for 2 weeks. I know. Your lawyer called me. Listen, Zoe, I'm working on this. I've been in meetings all day trying to arrange something. Can you post my bail? It's not that simple. The bail has to be posted in person in your jurisdiction, and I'm dealing with a major case here that I can't leave. But I'm sending someone good, someone I trust. They should be there tomorrow. Tomorrow? Zoe's voice broke. I have to stay here another night? I'm sorry, Zoe, I really am. But I promise you this will be over soon. Just hang in there one more day. As Zoe hung up, she didn't feel reassured. One more day felt like forever. And even if Andre sent someone to post bail, she'd still have to face Judge Harmon again in 2 weeks. What she didn't know was that her brother wasn't just sending anyone, and he wasn't just planning to post bail. Andre Taylor, the United States Attorney General, was about to bring the full weight of his office down on Judge Raymond Harmon's courtroom. The fluorescent lights in the juvenile detention center buzzed overhead as Zoe picked at her breakfast. The eggs were rubbery and the toast was stale, but hunger won out over her disgust. It was her 4th morning in this place, and she was trying hard not to lose hope. Taylor, a guard called from the doorway of the cafeteria. You've got a visitor. Zoe's heart leaped. Andre had said he was sending someone today. She quickly got up, drawing curious looks from the other teens at her table. Must be nice to have visitors, one girl muttered. Zoe ignored the comment and followed the guard through the maze of hallways. Instead of going to the usual visiting room, though, they took a different turn. Where are we going? Zoe asked. Private attorney visit, the guard replied. Different room. They stopped at a door marked attorney-client meeting. The guard opened it and Zoe stepped inside. A woman stood up from the table as Zoe entered. She was in her 40s with short, gray-streaked hair and a tailored charcoal suit that screamed expensive. She didn't look anything like the overworked Miss Winters. Zoe Taylor, I'm Vivian Chen, your new attorney. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Please sit down. Zoe sat across from her, hope and confusion battling inside her. Did my brother send you? Yes, Andre and I go way back. We worked together in New York before he moved to Washington. Ms. Chen opened a sleek leather briefcase. I've reviewed your case file, and frankly, I'm appalled. This should never have gone this far. For the first time in days, Zoe felt like someone was actually seeing her, hearing her. Can you get me out of here? That's the plan. I've already posted your bail. Ms. Chen pulled out some papers. You'll be released to my custody this morning, and you'll stay at my home until we resolve this situation. Zoe blinked back tears. Really? Just like that? Well, not exactly just like that. Your brother made some calls. I canceled my vacation, and I'll be billing him at my full rate. Ms. Chen winked. But yes, you're leaving today. What about Judge Harmon? I still have to go back to court in 2 weeks. Ms. Chen's expression turned serious. Actually, we're going back to court today. I filed for an emergency hearing to dismiss all charges. Can you do that? Watch me. Ms. Chen's smile was fierce now. Judge Harmon has a history of harsh treatment of juvenile offenders, especially those of color. It's time someone called him on it. But what about my backpack? My alibi, the library? All taken care of. I have sworn statements from the librarian confirming you were at study group until 5:55 p.m. I have the checkout record showing the books in your backpack were checked out at 5:52 p.m. And I have security camera footage from the library entrance showing you leaving at 5:57 p.m. Zoe stared at her in amazement. How did you get all that so fast? I'm very good at my job, Ms. Chen said simply. And your brother was very clear about the urgency. Now let's get you processed out of here and ready for court. The hearing is at 2 p.m. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Zoe was given back her original clothes, which had been washed but still looked wrinkled. Ms. Chen produced a bag with a new outfit, simple dark pants and a blue button-up shirt that fit perfectly. Andre told me your size, she explained. First impressions matter in court. By noon, Zoe was sitting in Ms. Chen's car, a sleek black sedan, driving through the city toward the lawyer's home. The simple pleasure of being in a normal car, seeing normal streets, almost overwhelmed her. We'll stop at my place first, Ms. Chen explained. You can shower, we'll have lunch, and go over our strategy. What exactly is the strategy? Zoe asked. Ms. Chen glanced at her. You tell the truth. I handled Judge Harmon. Ms. Chen's home was a modern townhouse with clean lines and minimal decoration. She showed Zoe to a guest bathroom with fluffy towels and expensive-looking toiletries. Take your time, she said. There are clean towels on the rack. The hot shower was the best thing Zoe had felt in days. She washed her hair twice, scrubbing away the feeling of the detention center. When she stepped out, wrapped in a soft towel, she almost felt human again. Over a lunch of homemade soup and sandwiches, Ms. Chen briefed her on what to expect. Judge Harmon doesn't like being challenged, especially by women, she said. He'll try to shut me down, talk over me, rush through the proceedings. But I've dealt with judges like him before. What about me? Should I say anything? Only if directly asked, and keep it brief and respectful. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Let me do the talking. That's what my public defender said too, Zoe noted. Ms. Winters isn't a bad lawyer. She's just drowning in cases and working in a broken system. Today, we're not just fighting for you. We're highlighting that broken system. At 1:45 p.m., they walked into the courthouse. Zoe's stomach was in knots, but Ms. Chen walked with the confidence of someone who owned the building. At the courtroom door, she paused. Ready? Zoe took a deep breath. Ready? The courtroom was the same as before, but it felt different walking in as a free person rather than a detainee. There were more people today, other cases waiting to be heard. Ms. Chen guided Zoe to the defense table and arranged her materials with practiced efficiency. At exactly 2 p.m., the bailiff called out, All rise. The Honorable Judge Raymond Harmon presiding. Judge Harmon entered, his robes flowing behind him. He took his seat at the bench and glanced at his docket. First case. The clerk stood. Emergency hearing, case number 347B, State versus Taylor. Judge Harmon frowned, peering over his reading glasses at Zoe and Ms. Chen. I don't recall scheduling an emergency hearing for this case. Ms. Chen stood. Your Honor, Vivian Chen representing Zoe Taylor. I filed the motion yesterday afternoon. And you are? What happened to the public defender? I've been privately retained, Your Honor. The motion was properly filed with your clerk and served to the prosecutor's office. Judge Harmon looked annoyed but nodded to the clerk. Do we have this motion? The clerk handed him a file. He flipped through it, his frown deepening. Motion to dismiss all charges, he read aloud. On what grounds, Counselor? Ms. Chen stood tall. Multiple grounds, Your Honor. First, lack of probable cause for the arrest. Second, violation of my client's Fourth Amendment rights. Third, exculpatory evidence clearly demonstrating my client's innocence. And fourth, procedural misconduct in the handling of this case. The prosecutor, Mr. Garcia, looked caught off guard. He shuffled through his papers, clearly unprepared for this challenge. Your Honor, the state hasn't had sufficient time to review these claims, he protested. They were properly served yesterday. Well within the required time frame. Ms. Chen countered smoothly. If I may proceed? Judge Harmon waved a hand. Make it quick, Counselor. I have a full docket today. Of course, Your Honor. Ms. Chen held up a folder. I have here sworn affidavits from Riverdale Public Library staff confirming my client was participating in a study group from 3:30 p.m. until 5:55 p.m. on the day in question. I also have security footage showing her leaving the library at 5:57 p.m., just 8 minutes before her arrest in the park. She placed the documents on the clerk's desk, who then handed them to the judge. Furthermore, Ms. Chen continued, my client's backpack, which was taken into evidence, contains library books checked out at 5:52 p.m. that day, along with her study materials. There is time-stamped homework with the library's Wi-Fi login records showing she was working on her college application, essays until moments before leaving. Judge Harmon looked increasingly uncomfortable as he reviewed the evidence. Ms. Chen, while this may establish your client's whereabouts before the arrest, it doesn't negate the fact that she was present in a known drug area. With respect, Your Honor, my client was simply walking through the public park to reach her bus stop, as she does 3 times a week after study group. The arrest report itself notes she was near the park exit, moving away from the area where drug activity was allegedly occurring. Judge Harmon shuffled the papers. The law doesn't require actual drug possession, merely presence with intent. And what evidence of intent exists, Your Honor? Ms. Chen's voice remained respectful but took on an edge. Was my client carrying cash consistent with drug purchases? Was she approaching known dealers? Did she make any suspicious movements? The arrest report answers no to all these questions. The judge looked to the prosecutor. Mr. Garcia? The prosecutor cleared his throat. Your Honor, the officer used his judgment based on the totality of circumstances. The circumstances of a black honor student walking through a public park in daylight? Ms. Chen interrupted. I've submitted my client's academic records showing her 4.0 GPA and acceptance letters to college information sessions. This is not someone looking to buy drugs. Judge Harmon's face reddened. Ms. Chen, in my courtroom, we don't play the race card. I'm not playing any card, Your Honor. I'm presenting facts relevant to potential bias in this case. Ms. Chen's voice remained steady. The facts show my client had legitimate reason to be in the park, was actively leaving when arrested, possessed no contraband, and has a spotless record. The charges should be dismissed immediately. The courtroom had grown quiet. Everyone was watching the exchange with interest. Zoe sat perfectly still, afraid to move lest she somehow break the spell Ms. Chen seemed to be weaving. Judge Harmon tapped his pen against his desk, clearly annoyed but also trapped by the evidence before him. Mr. Garcia, does the state have any objection to dismissing the charges? He finally asked. The prosecutor, seeing which way the wind was blowing, shook his head. Given the new evidence presented, the state has no objection, Your Honor. Judge Harmon sighed heavily.
Very well.
Case dismissed. He banged his gavel. Next case. Zoe couldn't believe it. Just like that, it was over. Ms. Chen gathered her materials and guided Zoe toward the exit. That's it? Zoe whispered as they walked out. I'm free? That's it, Ms. Chen confirmed with a smile. All charges dismissed. Your record will be clean. As they stepped into the hallway, Zoe felt a weight lift from her shoulders. But one question still nagged at her. Ms. Chen, you're obviously a really good lawyer. But how did my brother afford someone like you? He's a government lawyer, not a rich corporate attorney. Ms. Chen's smile turned mysterious. Let's just say your brother and I go way back, and he has more influence than you might realize. He'll explain everything when you talk to him. Zoe nodded, still confused but too relieved to press further. All that mattered now was that she was free. The nightmare was over, and soon she'd be able to thank her brother properly for coming through for her. That evening, Zoe sat in Miss Chen's living room, finally able to relax after the whirlwind of the day. She'd taken another long shower, eaten a proper meal, and borrowed a comfortable set of clothes Miss Chen had picked up for her. Now she was waiting for a video call with Andre, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Ms. Chen's laptop chimed and Andre's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and his tie loosened, but his smile was warm. "Zoe, thank goodness. Are you okay?" "I'm fine now," she said, leaning toward the screen. "Thanks to you and Ms. Chen. But Andre, how did you manage all this so quickly?" Ms. Chen must cost a fortune, and the way she handled Judge Harmon was amazing. Andre exchanged a look with Ms. Chen, who stood just behind Zoe. "There's something I haven't told you, Zoe, something I've kept pretty quiet in the family." "What?" "My job. It's a bit more significant than you probably realize," Zoe frowned. "Dad just says you work for the Justice Department." "That's true, but—" Andre took a deep breath. "Zoe, I'm the United States Attorney General." Zoe's mouth fell open. She looked back at Ms. Chen, who nodded in confirmation, then back to her brother on the screen. "The Attorney General? Like the top lawyer in the country? The one who advises the president?" "That's the one," Andre said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I was appointed last year. But why didn't you tell us? Dad just says you're some kind of government lawyer." "Dad knows, but we agreed to keep it low-key. The less publicity about my family, the better. It protects your privacy, and honestly, it lets me come home for Thanksgiving without everyone treating me differently." Andre sighed. "But when you called from the police station, I realized keeping you in the dark had backfired. You had no idea you could count on me for something like this." Zoe was still processing this revelation. Her brother, the brother who had taught her to ride a bike and teased her about her first crush, was one of the most powerful legal figures in the country. "So that's how you got Miss Chen to help me? Because you're her boss?" Ms. Chen laughed. "Not exactly. Andre and I were colleagues long before his appointment. We've stayed friends, and when he called saying his little sister was in trouble, I was happy to help." She paused. "Though I admit a call from the Attorney General does tend to get quick results." Andre's expression turned serious. "Zoe, what happened to you isn't just about you. From what Vivian has found, Judge Harmon has a troubling pattern of harsh sentences for minority juveniles. Your case caught my attention personally, but it's part of a bigger problem." "So what happens now?" Zoe asked. "For you? You go back to your normal life. Study for those college applications. Mom and Dad don't need to cut their trip short. I've left messages explaining everything's resolved." Andre shifted in his seat. "As for Judge Harmon, that's where things get interesting. Vivian, would you mind giving us a minute?" Ms. Chen nodded. "I'll go make some tea." She disappeared into the kitchen. Once she was gone, Andre leaned closer to the screen. "Tomorrow morning, I'm sending a Justice Department team to observe Judge Harmon's courtroom. Officially, it's part of a routine review. Unofficially, we're looking into multiple complaints about his handling of juvenile cases, particularly those involving minority defendants." Zoe felt a chill. "Because of me? Your case was the tipping point, but we've had our eye on him for a while. The statistics from his courtroom are troubling. Black and Hispanic teens receive bail amounts averaging 70% higher than white teens for identical charges. Their cases are less likely to be dismissed and more likely to result in detention." "That's terrible," Zoe said quietly. "It is, and it's also illegal. Judicial discretion doesn't cover discrimination." Andre ran a hand over his face. "The thing is, Zoe, I'd like you to be there tomorrow." "Me? Why, 2 reasons. First, I want Judge Harmon to see you sitting there, free and clear, as a reminder that his actions have consequences. Second, and more importantly, I want you to see that speaking up matters, that the system, for all its flaws, can sometimes be fixed." Zoe thought about the other teens she'd met in detention, kids who didn't have a brother in high places, who might still be trapped in Judge Harmon's web. "I'll be there," she said firmly. The next morning, Zoe dressed in the outfit Ms. Chen had bought her. It felt strange returning to the courthouse voluntarily after her experience, but this time she walked in with her head high, no longer a defendant but a witness. Ms. Chen led her to the same courtroom where Judge Harmon would be presiding. But today, things looked different. In the back row sat 3 people in dark suits, 2 women and a man, each with a leather portfolio bearing the Department of Justice seal. The observers, Ms. Chen whispered as they took seats behind them. Judge Harmon entered, looking much as he had the day before. He noticed the observers immediately, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing as he took his seat. "First case," he called, his voice noticeably less harsh than Zoe remembered. The morning proceeded with Judge Harmon hearing various cases. Zoe noticed he seemed unusually patient, taking time with each defendant, carefully explaining his decisions. It was like watching a completely different judge from the one who had dismissed her so cruelly. During a brief recess, one of the observers, a tall black woman with close-cropped gray hair, approached Ms. Chen. "Vivian, good to see you," she said warmly. "And this must be Zoe. Zoe, this is Patricia Washington, Deputy Director of the Civil Rights Division," Ms. Chen introduced them. Ms. Washington shook Zoe's hand. "Your brother speaks very highly of you. I'm sorry about what you went through." "Is Judge Harmon in trouble?" Zoe asked quietly. Ms. Washington's expression was carefully neutral. "Let's just say we're conducting a thorough review. Judge Harmon's not the only one we're looking at. But his case disposition patterns have raised some red flags." When court resumed, Zoe noticed Judge Harmon watching the observers, clearly aware of their scrutiny. The afternoon cases included several juveniles, and Zoe paid close attention to how he handled them. There was a noticeable difference. Bail amounts were more reasonable, explanations more thorough, alternatives to detention more readily explored. As the day wound down, Ms. Chen nudged Zoe. "Last case coming up. You'll want to watch this one," the bailiff called out. Case number 392C, State v. Richards. A familiar face appeared at the defendant's table. Darnell, the boy from Zoe's chemistry class who had been swept up in the same park raid. He looked nervous, wearing the same detention center jumpsuit Zoe had worn just days ago. The public defender standing beside him was not Ms. Winters, but an older man who looked equally overworked. "Your Honor, my client has been held for 4 days on charges of presence in a known drug area. We request release on his own recognizance pending trial." Judge Harmon glanced at the Justice Department observers, then back at Darnell. "Young man, do you have family present?" Darnell's mother raised her hand from the gallery. "Here, Your Honor." "And you're willing to take responsibility for ensuring he appears at his next hearing?" "Yes, sir." "Darnell's a good boy. He was just cutting through the park after basketball practice." Judge Harmon reviewed the file. "I see no prior record, and the circumstances are similar to another case that recently came before this court." His eyes flickered briefly to Zoe. "Given these factors, I'm inclined to dismiss the charges entirely. Does the state have any objection?" The prosecutor, caught off guard, stammered, "No objection, Your Honor." Case dismissed. Judge Harmon banged his gavel. Darnell looked stunned, as did his mother. As they hugged, Zoe felt a surge of satisfaction. Maybe the system could work after all, with the right pressure applied. As court adjourned, Judge Harmon was about to leave the bench when the courtroom doors opened. A tall man in an immaculate suit entered, flanked by 2 people who were clearly security. The entire room fell silent. Zoe recognized him immediately. "Andre," she whispered. The United States Attorney General walked down the center aisle with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. The Justice Department observers stood respectfully. Ms. Chen touched Zoe's arm, indicating she should stand too. Judge Harmon remained frozen on the bench, clearly recognizing Andre but confused by his presence in this small local courtroom. "Judge Harmon," Andre said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "I apologize for the interruption. I'm Andre Taylor, United States Attorney General." "Mr. Attorney General," Judge Harmon managed. "This is an unexpected honor. I'm here on official business, reviewing the implementation of juvenile justice reforms across several districts." Andre's tone was professional, but carried an undercurrent of authority that made everyone in the room straighten up. "But I also have a personal interest in this particular courtroom." Judge Harmon's expression showed dawning recognition as Andre turned slightly toward Zoe. "You see, my sister recently appeared before you, Zoe Taylor." The color drained from Judge Harmon's face as he looked from Andre to Zoe and back again. The courtroom remained silent, everyone watching this unexpected confrontation. I was not aware of your relationship to the defendant, Judge Harmon said carefully. Former defendant, Andre corrected, and that's exactly my point, Your Honor. No one appearing in your courtroom should need a relative in government to receive fair treatment. Judge Harmon's jaw tightened. I assure you, Mr. Attorney General, all defendants in my courtroom receive equal treatment under the law. The data suggests otherwise, Andre replied evenly, which is why my office will be conducting a thorough review of case dispositions in this district, with particular attention to juvenile defendants and potential disparities in treatment based on race or economic status. He stepped closer to the bench. This isn't personal, Judge Harmon. It's about ensuring that every young person who comes before this court, whether they're my sister or someone with no connections at all, receives the same fair treatment under the law. Judge Harmon, now visibly uncomfortable, nodded stiffly. Of course. My courtroom is open to your review. I appreciate that. Andre turned to Zoe and gave her a slight nod before addressing the room at large. Justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done. That's a promise I make not just as Attorney General, but as someone who believes in the system enough to hold it accountable. As Andre turned to leave, Zoe caught his eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Her brother, the United States Attorney General, gave her a small smile in return, not the smile of a powerful government official, but the proud smile of a big brother who had come through when it mattered most. 3 months later, Zoe sat in her living room surrounded by college acceptance letters. 6 universities had said yes, including her top choice, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Her parents beamed with pride as she compared financial aid packages. Georgetown's offering the best scholarship, her father noted, pointing to the numbers, and being close to Andre would be nice. Zoe nodded, though her reasons for wanting to attend Georgetown went beyond just being near her brother. The events of that terrible week in juvenile detention had changed her in ways she was still discovering. Her phone buzzed with a text from Darnell. Did you see the news? She picked up the remote and turned on the local news channel. The reporter stood outside the county courthouse, microphone in hand. In a stunning development today, Judge Raymond Harmon announced his retirement, following the release of a Department of Justice report citing systematic disparities in his handling of juvenile cases. The report, which examined 3 years of case data, found that Black and Hispanic teens received significantly harsher treatment than white teens facing identical charges. The camera cut to footage of Judge Harmon leaving the courthouse, stone-faced, ignoring reporters' questions. Then it switched to a press conference where a Department of Justice spokesperson, not Andre, Zoe noticed, discussed the findings. While Judge Harmon has not admitted to any wrongdoing, he has chosen to step down rather than face possible disciplinary proceedings. The report recommends sweeping changes to the county's juvenile justice system, including mandatory bias training for all judges and regular statistical reviews of sentencing patterns. Zoe's mother sat down beside her, taking her hand. Your brother did this. Because of you. Not just because of me, Zoe said quietly. Because it was wrong, and it had been wrong for a long time. Her phone rang, Andre calling. She answered and put him on speaker. I guess you've seen the news, he said without preamble. Just now. Harmon's really gone? Effective immediately. The report left him no choice. But Zoe, that's not why I'm calling. Andre's voice had an excited edge to it. Remember that project I mentioned? The Juvenile Justice Reform Initiative? The one you wanted me to speak at? After the dust had settled from her case, Andre had asked if she'd be willing to share her story as part of a Justice Department initiative. Yes. We're officially launching next month. I just got approval for a 10-city pilot program. We're starting with cities where the data shows the biggest disparities in juvenile justice outcomes. Zoe's father leaned closer to the phone. That's fantastic, Andre. Will you be traveling to all 10 cities? Not personally, but we're assembling teams for each location. Which brings me to my question, Zoe. The kickoff event is in D.C. 2 weeks from now. I'd like you to be one of our featured speakers. Zoe hesitated. She'd been sharing her story locally, speaking at her school, at community meetings, even to a youth group at her church. But a national platform was different. Who else will be speaking? She asked. Policy experts, advocates, some big names in criminal justice reform, but most importantly, other young people who've been through the system. Your story is powerful, Zoe, but it's not unique. What makes it valuable is that you had a way out that most kids don't. That was the part that had been haunting Zoe these past months. Every time she spoke about her experience, she was painfully aware that her happy ending came courtesy of having a brother in a position of extraordinary power. What about all the other Zoes out there? I'll do it, she said firmly. But I want to talk about more than just what happened to me. I want to talk about what we're doing to fix the system. That's exactly what we need, Andre replied. The personal story gets attention, but the solutions create change. After the call ended, Zoe returned to her college letters, now with even more clarity about her path forward. Georgetown wasn't just close to Andre, it was close to where decisions were made, where she could continue to be part of fixing the broken system she'd experienced firsthand. 2 weeks later, Zoe stood backstage at the Department of Justice auditorium, trying to calm her nerves. Her parents sat in the front row, having flown in specially for the event. Ms. Chen was there too, now working with Andre's team on the reform initiative. Zoe peered out at the audience, government officials, advocacy groups, media. So many people with the power to make real change. Andre approached, looking very official in his suit, but with the same warm smile he'd always had. Ready? As I'll ever be. Zoe smoothed down her blazer, navy blue, professional but still age-appropriate. Any last advice? Just tell your truth. That's more powerful than any rehearsed speech. Andre went out first, stepping up to the podium to introduce the initiative. He outlined the problems, the statistics showing racial disparities, the harsh treatment of juveniles, the lifelong consequences of early involvement in the justice system. Then he shared the solutions, the policy changes, the training programs, the oversight mechanisms. But numbers and policies only tell part of the story, he concluded. To understand why this matters, we need to hear from those who've experienced these injustices firsthand. It's my privilege to introduce my sister, Zoe Taylor, whose experience helped bring these issues to light. As Zoe walked onto the stage, the applause felt surreal. 3 months ago, she'd been in a cell wearing a gray jumpsuit, treated like a criminal for walking through a park. Now she was here, about to address a room full of powerful people who could actually change things. She took a deep breath and began. My name is Zoe Taylor. I'm 17 years old. I'm an honor student with a 4.0 GPA. I volunteer at my local library. I've never been in trouble a day in my life. And 3 months ago, I spent 4 days in juvenile detention because I walked through the wrong park at the wrong time. Zoe described her arrest, the night in the holding cell, the appearance before Judge Harmon. She didn't dramatize, she didn't need to. The simple facts were dramatic enough. Judge Harmon set my bail at $3,000 knowing my parents were out of the country. He scheduled my next hearing for 2 weeks later, effectively sentencing me to 2 weeks in detention without trial, without evidence, without considering any alternatives. She paused, looking out at the silent audience. I was lucky. I had a brother who could help. But in that detention center, I met dozens of kids who weren't lucky. Kids who didn't have a powerful relative or money for bail, or parents who could miss work to attend hearings. Kids who were stuck in a system that saw them as guilty from the moment they entered it. Zoe gestured to the row of young people seated to the side of the stage. Like Tyler, who spent 30 days in detention for a curfew violation because his single mom couldn't afford to take time off work to pick him up. Or Lucia, who missed 2 months of school waiting for a hearing date because the court was backlogged. Or Darnell, who was arrested in the same park sweep as me, but spent 3 more days in detention simply because he didn't have the connections I did. She turned to face Andre and the Justice Department officials. The initiative you're launching today isn't just about statistics or policies. It's about real kids whose lives are being shaped or destroyed by a system that doesn't see them as individuals with potential. A system that's supposed to rehabilitate but often just punishes. A system that should be blind to color but clearly isn't. Zoe saw her parents in the front row, her mother wiping away tears, her father nodding encouragement.